Good evening, everyone, and welcome to, I believe, the fourth annual GVCC. I am indeed honored and humbled to have been chosen for such a task as moderating something as personal and amazing as this conference. I am an employee of EMD Serono. I am a grants coordinator there. I also partner with the initiative Embracing Carers, which is what we do, what this event is actually all about. We encourage, empower, enlighten, revive, renew, and refresh caregivers, giving them an avenue to have a voice, not to feel so alone, not to feel like it's just them, like they're the only one. I'm also a pastor. I've been in ministry for over 20 years and pastoring for 9. So I've had the opportunity to counsel and sit with and chat with people of the like. So I'm hoping that this experience will further engage and let you know that you are not alone. There's plenty of help. There are others who are also caregivers. There are others who are also willing to support and hold your arms up, if you will, when it comes to taking care of a sick family member, a sick friend. So I'm not going to belabor the hour by chatting. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Wanda Green. She is the founder and of Caregiver Empowering Patients. Wanda?
I am a caregiver, family caregiver to my mom of 10 years. Most recently, she suffered a series of, I'll call it the big 3, COVID, cancer, and stroke, not in that order. But through that journey, being a caregiver and also a patient of lupus, myself, I've learned how to navigate the system, how to use my voice in those hard moments, and in the moments that you have to make decisions for your loved one facing cancer. Because when people say the word cancer, it all of a sudden gets real, and very critical, and things change very quickly. So in that space of being a caregiver and wanting to be taken seriously, wanting to not be dismissed in the medical community, to shine a light on resources and ways in which you can effectively communicate to your loved one's care and medical team. It's really extremely important. And as you're doing all of that, and as you're constantly caring for your partner, friend, relative, parent, spouse, neighbor, colleague, you got to remember to take care of yourself. Something a family member reminded me of today. So it's a constant battle, but grateful to be able to be a part of my mother's journey in this cancer fight. And you can reach me at empowering_PC on IG. I have founded a group of, as Darci was talking about, you need community, you need support for all diseases, but definitely cancer. So please reach out there and get support where you can find it. Thank you, Darci.
Thank you, Wanda. I had a sick parent. He didn't have cancer, however, he did have congestive heart failure. And it is a tough place to be in when you're taking care of someone. And you do feel like nobody understands how tired you are. Nobody understands how you have a dual role. It's not just you're taking care of someone, it's someone you love, right? It's someone that you care about. But you don't have time to explore how you're feeling. You don't have time to explore the fact that your feelings are hurt. You only have time to focus on taking care of your mom, in my case, taking care of my dad. So it's wonderful. I think it is absolutely phenomenal that you have created such an avenue for other caregivers who may be feeling some of the same angst and some of the same near the wells, if you will, in taking care of someone. I think that's beautiful. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I applaud you for even finding mental space to create something like this for caregivers to come. I wish there was something like this when I was having my moment in that. So bravo to you, Ms. Wanda, bravo to you. Our next speaker will be Faith Mutale, and I beg your pardon if I mispronounce that. She is a CRNP, that she's a nurse practitioner in oncology at Abramson Cancer Center, the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. I consider it a privilege to be part of this panel discussion and conference, and I hope that I can provide some valuable information in terms of caregiving. Also, like some of you on this panel, I have been a caregiver, but I'm also a provider. So I sort of like, I'm coming in from two perspectives.
Our next speaker will be Lisa Petgrave Nelson. She is a social worker in oncology at the Cancer Institute at St. Francis Hospital. Welcome, Lisa.
Good evening. Thank you, guys. I'm very honored to participate in this conference. I do want to give a shout out to GRYT Health for identifying the need, especially for all caregivers, but specifically bringing up the unique challenges that African American caregivers have, and the patients that are our family members that we serve, our family members, our friends, whatever role we're in. I appreciate them bringing it up and providing a space for us to provide education and support for caregivers. We know that there are many disparities. COVID-19 really showed us how communities of color were affected, and increasingly with caregiving and other things, with other disparities. I'm sure there'll be time for us to go into a little bit more about the need for respite, the need for education, the need for many of us who are caregivers within the community to seek support, to build relationships with our providers, as Faith said, and that representation within the oncology setting does really matter. So I thank you guys for having this conversation, and I look forward to learning and bringing back that information from what I learned tonight to share with the patients that I serve at the Cancer Institute. So thank you.
So I want to go back to Ms. Wanda. You spoke to some interesting moments in taking care of your mom. I wanted to know if you can kind of expound on some of those areas. You spoke on something that really struck me, and that was the 3 a.m. call. And sometimes you need to have someone, and a lot of times you don't. And if you would speak on that a little bit, and how you handled that, how you work through that space.
Being a caregiver, you're always there's always something that is set before you, whether it's something very acute, or it could just be, my mom's not feeling well for the day. She maybe has a headache, or something she ate upset her, that type of thing. But during this pandemic, as I shared before, I'd like to share to our new audience, my mother suffered 7 strokes. And these strokes, we later found out, were a precursor to her having cancer. So every time she had a stroke, I had, you have the rush of adrenaline, you're upset, you're trying to get, 911, so many things are happening all at once. And for my mom, for whatever reason, her strokes always occurred at night. So being awake at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, when everybody else is asleep. And the only people that are with you is, my mom, the EMS workers. They're doing all the vitals. They're asking me 1,000 questions. Everything's like an adrenaline rush because you're just trying to make sure she's okay and that she makes it. People don't make it always through strokes. And the care has to be so responsive. So in those moments, when they're wheeling her away and they're pulling away from the curb, and I'm just left standing there, it's just, the silence is deafening because your heart drops. And during this pandemic, there were many times where we weren't permitted to, for good reason, we weren't permitted to come into the hospital as visitors. And it just rips your heart out that you can't be there, that I couldn't be by her side even longer because you just want to do something to help the situation, and had to stay back and stay at home. And as I kind of just was with my feelings and my thoughts and my tears and my angst and my anxiety and the struggle of it all, nobody's awake at that time. So even when I'm sending text messages, there's no one to receive them till maybe about 4 hours later, when everyone's waking up and getting ready to start their day. But in that quiet time, I usually do a lot of reflection, a lot of crying, a lot of just, grabbing a garment of hers or something to hold on to that's tangible, because you don't know what's going on. You don't know the minute by minute. Most often, the hospital would call and keep me informed. But my mother also, with the deficits that came with those multiple strokes, she also was diagnosed with vascular dementia. So when she's in a stroke-like state, sometimes she's nonverbal and she can't speak. So I am the physical extension of my mom. So to have that kind of heartache and communication that you want to kind of keep open with the doctors as they take care of her in ER and all the specialists, it's just heart-wrenching. It's something you have to do, but it's heart-wrenching because you just want to be there, at any time your loved one is taken to the hospital. So the 3 a.m. call is very real to me, and it's happened more than one time. And I don't think that I have mastered it by any means. I think just allowing myself to feel is the mastery of it. And in those moments, pray, journal, try to do what I can to hang on until I get more information from the medical team and the providers.
Thank you so much. Normally that time of morning for me is prayer and devotion time, but when you have a sick parent, it leaves you scared a little bit.
Oh, very much so, Darci.
Yeah, you touched in on whether or not they're going to make it, whether or not they're going to come out of that. And a stroke is a tricky thing. It can be mild or it can have a catastrophic result. So
Yeah.
I totally understand how you feel, because there's been times I was sitting by the hospital bed in the living room, putting, I've actually put a mirror under his nose. I've actually put my hand on his chest to see if he was still with me. I was terrified, and I was adult when my dad had a massive heart attack. But I'm a daddy's girl. I tell everyone I wasn't an elder, I wasn't a mother, I was nothing but Shelly. I was his baby girl at that moment, and terrified that this was going to be the moment, and there isn't anybody, so
it's a hard place to be in.
It is. It is. Yeah. It is. I'm very grateful that I have a relationship with God. So it was in those moments that I could say, okay, God, not now. Don't do it right now. This moment, heal him from this right now. So I think it's good to know that I have to repeat that that other caregivers know someone else is feeling the
Mm.
same thing that you're feeling. You're not
Absolutely.
alone. You're not
Absolutely.
alone.
Yeah, it's such a major sticking point because often in those any time of caregiving, but in the 3 a.m. moments or in the moments where it's the most critical and you can't get a
Yes.
hold of anybody else,
Yes.
gotta know that
Yes.
someone else is going through the same thing and people are there to support you.
Yes.
You might
Absolutely.
not be able to get in touch with them, but they
Yes.
are there
Yes.
around the world.
Mm.
Yeah.
They are. And that makes you feel good.
Yes, it
It
does.
kind of, in my world, we call it pulling on the anointing of another stronger than you. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to toss it back over to Miss Lisa to speak to the, if you will, the how can I word this? To speak to the mental care and the financial care and other avenues that might be available to those of us who are in whether current or who have been in it for a while of trying to take care of someone who's sick.
Working in the oncology clinic, in the infusion center, I follow patients from diagnosis to end of life. And so just in general, some of the statistics about caregivers, they're most likely women. They are, for African American, most likely women. They are less likely to be able to take off time from work to provide that care to their family member. And we know that there's a lot of cultural dynamics around caregiving for us too. We look at it as kind of like a religious obligation and a cultural obligation to care for our family member. Whether it's cancer, whether it's CHF, whatever chronic disease, whatever it's a stroke, an accident, we oftentimes don't look outside for outside help. And sometimes we don't have the ability to pay for outside help. So
Mm,
we do rely on informal caregiving, right? Where it's people not being paid. So we're relying on our sister to do 2 hours,
yes.
somebody from the church to do another 3 hours.
Yes.
And so we're all coming together, your TT, your this, your whoever, your papa, like
A
somebody.
community.
Yes, the whole community is helping. And so it does, and that's what's important to us, to make sure that our families are at home. But it's also important, I think, for us to reach out, to have opportunities like this, to
Mhm.
look for support. I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
within my practice and within my work, I'm always trying to find ways to encourage um, African American caregivers and patients to reach out for support, whether if you have a blood cancer, a solid tumor, whatever it is, to reach out. And
Absolutely.
it's hard. I think that sometimes we don't want to show that vulnerability, to kind of take the mask off and to say, this is hard. Like, this is hard
Yes.
work. And another thing I want to add to is that sometimes, and this happens in all families, but the people, we're being caregivers for people who probably weren't even nice to us, maybe weren't even a good
Oh my
parent.
goodness.
So that adds another
That's good.
dynamic, another, where it's like, remember that Tyler Perry movie, The Angry
Yes.
Black Woman? And you're like, here you are bathing someone, feeding them. Your
Yes.
mother probably wasn't a really nice person when you were growing up, and you
That's
have to
good.
now be a
That's
caregiver
good.
for them. So there are a lot of dynamics involved in caregiving, and the financial cost, the emotional cost, but the main thing is seeking help. We can't,
Yes.
especially for Black women who are most likely to be the caregiver. Black, men are also things. The tides are changing, and so there's a big
Yes.
percentage of an increasing percentage of male caregivers now. But I think that we really need to reach out for support outside of our family members. There are
Yes.
resources within the community that we don't even know, and we won't know until we're able to participate and to make time. Like tonight, let me take 30 minutes, a half hour. Let me just
Yes.
listen to what other people are saying. So it's really up to us, especially like Faith, who, and even for you, Darci, all of us, for the
Yes,
caregivers like Wanda, who are like, girl, let me tell you about this program. Let me tell you about
absolutely.
CRYT. You could tell your congregants, because, you know, African Americans, as far as, and white people love God too, you know.
Yes.
But I think that it's so important to speak about that, you know, from the
It
pulpit or through
is.
a group, whatever,
Absolutely right.
and also for Faith, like as providers, to encourage and to say, no, you have to come, even if you are going to be that one Black face. I think that sometimes we get nervous and we're like, oh
Yes.
my gosh, am I going to be the one Black person in the room? You're going to hear from other people, Black or white. They're going to be feeling and dealing with the same losses, loss of autonomy, loss of self, loss of the parent, this anticipatory grief, all of
My
these things.
goodness.
So, you know, it's quite overwhelming, but we need to make sure that people know that there's support, to take care of ourselves, to eat right. You know, caregivers have higher percentage of heart disease and other
Yes.
chronic conditions.
Yes.
So we need to make sure that we're supported and being involved with others to share and to lean on.
I love that. You said some amazing, amazing things. And I think it's so powerful to look at this screen and see not just women, but to see women of color actually coming together to have this type of conversation. It's necessary. Since my invitation to participate with GRITE, I have actually been looking and researching other avenues with my colleagues at church to assist and help caregivers, because in the church, it's a lot of it. And I think I shared in one of these meetings, in the church, the Black church mainly, there are a lot of people who are taking care of someone. And you're absolutely right. It's not a Black thing or a white thing. It's not, it really has nothing to do with that. The core of it is the caregiver needs support. If they're pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring out to the sick, poor person, who's pouring into them? Who's strengthening them? Who's giving back to them? You know, you can't pour from an empty vessel. You have to be filled. And that means you have to talk to someone other than the doctor sometimes. You have to talk to someone other than the person you're taking care of, if they're able. You know what I mean? So you do have to pull on the village, and you have to find that. I wanted so bad to say to you, Miss Wanda, at our little prep meeting, girl, call me. I'm up. You don't have to feel alone. Call me. I'm up. I wanted to put my number in the chat. So
I will. And you can.
Absolutely.
We'll be, all of us will be in touch.
Yeah, you don't have
but
to
it's
feel
so
alone
true.
at all. There is somebody. The Bible says, I've never been in an arena where I can be fully myself. So I'm excited about that. But the Bible said there's always a ram in the thicket. I'm your ram in the thicket. Call
That's
me.
right. Thank you, Darci. Thank you, Darci. I will.
Absolutely.
Because
absolutely. I'm not going to leave you out, Faith. I want you to give you both of your perspectives from a nursing point of view. You see it all, the Black, the Hispanic, the white, you see it all. So what is your perspective in the disparities, and not just, but in the overall lack of attention that caregivers get from the medical side? And I'm not dismissing Miss Lisa, she's medical as well, but from the physical medical side, the medicine part.
I think that as all of you were talking about the issues of caregiving. Clearly, the issues of caregiving are real.
Absolutely.
They're very, very real. And they're compounded by everything else that's coming with that, the financial aspects of caregiving, the inability to be able to manage everything else that as an individual you have to manage. And so when I am seeing patients in clinic, one of the things that I try to always address is, how are you doing? And I'm literally asking how you're doing. How can we help? Because resources are available, but though they're not completely they're not sufficient to cover everything, but at least there's some things that, you know, caregivers can tap into. And for example, and Lisa can speak to this as well, the American Cancer Society does offer some resources, even if it is that you have, you know, someone help transport a family member because you're not able to. And then we can take care of you when you come to clinic. Monies are available. Individuals give monies to help support patients that are going through different situations, and especially for our patients, you know, the cancer patients. You know, we have individuals that have given, say, Visa cards, and they have designated these monies to give to patients who are struggling.
That's amazing.
And so sometimes as a caregiver, you actually have to open up and ask. And there's no, like, you can't be afraid or you can't be embarrassed about it, because a lot of times I find that caregivers may not necessarily be opening up because they feel or believe that we might think differently about them based on the needs that they're expressing. So it is important as a caregiver to let your provider know what you're going through, because resources are there. You know, respite care, for example, is available in some situations. Home care is available, and even government resources or, you know, things that they provide to patients and their caregivers. And I think of, you know, this program that actually will pay for a caregiver to take care of their loved one. So they're not thinking about having to go back to work. Monies may not be sufficient necessarily, but it is something. It is better than nothing. You know, when people are struggling, for instance, with electrical bills, bills, you know,
real life
issues. Those are things that we actually do write letters for. Letting people know that you don't have to think about not providing adequate care because you have to go to work. So opening up and asking questions. We're here to help, we're here to listen, and we want to make sure that even you as the caregiver actually has a good quality of life, because there's a lot of physical, emotional turmoil that as a caregiver you're going. So there is something known as caregiver burden. And as you have noted, people can get sick. And so if the caregiver is sick, then the patient doesn't get the help that they need. And I like what Wanda wrote in the chat, which is say, it takes a village.
It does.
And it truly does take a village. And sometimes you have to be kind to yourself to allow someone else to come in and help provide the care, even if it's just for a, you know, for a few hours. And that can be very difficult because we all think that we are the best caregivers for our loved ones, and that is true. But we also have to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much for pointing that out. I was going to say that you brought up so many important points. I think that there are organizations that are out there. You mentioned American Cancer Society. Even today, I just got an email that they actually are providing, they've partnered with the hotel chain to help patients, cancer patients, to get care if they're, you know, if you're in Ohio, if you're in Michigan, wherever you are. So they're partnering with hotels to help if someone is in a certain town that needs cancer care. You know, WIGS, the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, you know, with, and there are many nationally known organizations, and within, I know within my cancer center, and each cancer center is different. You know, we have Uber Health that we help people donate. So you have Uber Health that they help, in addition to Road to Recovery, which is from American Cancer Society. And we know that, yes, you may call up and the volunteer may not be able to help you on this Monday, but the following Tuesday, then you can go to, you know, your family member can kind of break up the monotony of you taking them. They get dropped off, and you're able to go into work or sleep in a little bit or get to work on time. So there are many resources. I think the other thing that you mentioned too was, and I see it amongst all groups, right? Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, it's the stoicism, the stoic
Oh,
belief of wanting to say, you know, a lot of patients, when I ask them how they're doing, if they need help with anything, I always say, you know, I know it's hard being a caregiver.
Mhm.
And they're like, you know, they're always very shy and saying, you know, I've never asked for nothing, but, you know, I have been out of work for such and such a time and I'm losing my hair. Can, you know, I can't afford a wig, or I
wow.
can't get here, or there's a lot of food insecurity. The
Mhm.
dietitians at work, they pack food, you know, they have boosts and samples from different
Mhm.
places. And that takes, you know, that takes away from you having to pay $40 for 6 or 5 boosts when, you know, they're getting it as a free sample. So all of
Yeah.
those things help out. So I think it's really about, you kept mentioning patients speaking up in their medical team. I think it's important for us because yes, the trust has to be there. The caregiver has to feel heard to,
Yeah.
and you know, with rapport and building up over time. And the way that we're speaking, you know, the way I can see that we're in whatever capacities that we're in, that we care about the people that we serve. So it's important to have that rapport and then build on that to make them feel comfortable to say, girl, I can't, you know, I need a food card, you
Yes.
know? I mean, and we have stop, you know, we have Stop and Shop cards, we have different food cards, you know, here's $250, here's $100, Pink Aid, just
I
various
love that.
organizations. So
I
it's
Mhm.
love
important to
that.
speak with your provider, the social worker,
Mhm.
and other caregivers, and who should be willing to share that information to say, yes, my mother, you know, she has pancreatic cancer, she can't keep anything down except for this boost product that we have, this, you know, and share that information. But thank you for pointing out all of that, Faith.
Yeah, and I actually think of one of our patients, you know, an older African American woman that I always used to look at as though she were my mom. And so every time that she would come into clinic, I would give her like $50, you know, or $100. And because I knew that even though she never said it, I knew there was a need, because the son, who was the primary caregiver, was not working.
Mm,
And so I knew, just based on conversations that we'd had, that that $50, that $20 would go a long way. And she was so appreciative of that, but she was also very proud, and understandably so, not wanting to ask. And so sometimes as providers, we have to be, we have to be able to discern where
yes.
there may be a need,
Absolutely.
where someone isn't actually speaking about, um, and being able to help, or at
Mhm.
least having a social worker come in to sort of like have that conversation.
Right.
People don't like to talk about finances, so I would refer to, you know, the social worker, and I'll just say, can you please, you know, help with this? And sometimes even the co-pays, you know, co-pays can
Wow.
be challenging
Yes.
for a lot of
Very
our
much so.
patients. And so I have, as a provider, I have the discretion of foregoing that copay. And unless someone actually says something to me, sometimes I don't know.
Wow.
And they're paying, if I am seeing someone on a weekly basis and they're having to pay $50, you know, and this is how I came to know with this particular person that I actually referred to. You know, it was, she said something, she says, Faith, these co-pays. And she was only paying $20 a week. You heard, I said only, but it
Wow.
wasn't only $20 for her.
A lot.
You know, that was a lot of money. She was on an income that really couldn't pay for everything that she needed. So I think that even in our roles as providers, of course, Lisa, you probably have tremendous amounts of times with patients, you know, talking about them. So it's being able to identify where the needs are without someone necessarily all the time telling you. And we hear you, because I think all of us have been in situations where we have needed that extra push to get where we need to be going.
Right. No, that's an important point. I think that depending on the need of the clinic, if you're not, or, you know, wherever center, or it could be a dialysis center, it could be anywhere, right, that you're providing care to patients. I think just like what you said, it's so important that you were able to hone in and to listen. You know, you did a quick assessment, and whether you were seeing her come over a period of time, you were able to assess with just the information that you were given to say,
Yeah.
you know what, Ding, she needs help. And she didn't have to say a word. And I think
Yeah.
of other smaller clinics or clinics throughout the country that may not be equipped with, maybe they with 2 or 3 social workers. It's not a Sloan Kettering, it's not a like a larger institution. Or it could be where it's a rural setting. What does that look like with someone if you're in a small town in Mississippi or something like that, a small cancer center? What do they have there? But I think that the providers definitely need to be in tune and to listen intently, purposefully, and to make sure that we don't have to embarrass, because it is embarrassing for some of our patients to ask for help, but we need to hone in, and it's really about the delivery and saying, Miss Jones, I think this may be helpful for you. Just let me know if you need anything else. And you slip them a gift card,
Yeah.
Or a food card or something. So yeah, I think that's really important, where they shouldn't have to ask. And it takes time. I think it takes being an experienced provider, and just listening and honing in on what our patients, our clients need.
During COVID-19, I'm curious if all of you could give a little piece. That's a piece to that. We're going to wind it down for our time. What did caregiving actually look like from the practitioner point of view, as well, you, Miss Wanda, from the actual caregiver during COVID-19 with your mom? I think we'll start with you, with your mom actually being actively, if that makes sense, actively in need of care. What did that look like after Miss Wanda? Miss Lisa, you can fall in after that, and then Faith, you can come in after that as well.
It was very strange and very difficult, very desolate. I love that in both Lisa and Faith's cancer centers and in their respective areas of the country. I'm on the West Coast. They're able to give those needs out, but they don't exist here. It's the God honest truth. They don't exist. I was never given a gift card. Was never asked if I needed this, that, or the other. I had one of Mama's caregivers that actually said, we have to take care of you also. So during this phase of COVID-19, it was very difficult, very stressful, lacking in so many different areas because there was no accessibility.
Wow.
When I called ACS, they were not doing the Road to Recovery rides. It shut down. I mean, our country was on lockdown, and for a very long period of time. So if you didn't have transportation, or you needed to take access or any other medical transportation to and from your appointments, like Mama and I did, that's what we did. And when we didn't do that, I spent on rideshare. So caregivers are very resourceful.
Yes.
People. They know how to bend. They know how to improvise. They know how to find other ways to make things happen, because your whole how can I say it? Your whole rush and your whole the way you press in and lean into the cancer situation is getting your loved one to and from all of their appointments and setting up those appointments and navigating the entire system that not only includes their medical need of getting the treatment and radiation and oncology and surgery and so forth, but also their emotional needs, their groceries, their pharmacies, and all the other areas that touch our lives. So unfortunately for us, we didn't have access to any of that stuff the lady shared.
Wow.
And there were no additional social workers.
Wow.
And I think if our experience had been different, if we weren't in COVID-19, maybe some of those resources would have been a little bit more available because they would be up and running. But I think it's wonderful that we're having this conversation, because I think to connect the dots and to, as everyone has shared, communicate and ask and share and be a part of the caregiving process, but also make sure that the medical providers that you were talking are intuitive to the needs. And if they're more experienced, they are. But then some doctors are experienced, but they have experience in being a doctor, but they have no bedside manner. And they don't really care. They don't really care. And they shut out, they gaslight the caregiver. The caregiver needs to be an integral part of the patient's experience, of our loved one's experience during this cancer treatment or any other treatment. In our Black community, in all communities, because we are the ones that are with our loved ones 24 hours a day. We are kind of like the human symptom tracker for what they're going through and what they're dealing with on a regular basis. And to silence our voice and to not give it the weight that it needs and deserves, it shifts the trajectory of even my mom's care. They're able to respond differently if I say, you know what, doctor, this and this and this happened, and mama had all of these side effects, and we called you on this, and I sent you something to your to the patient portal on that. So I think it's access, and I think it's equity, and I think it's bias, and I think it's a little bit of everything else in between, because yes, finances are a big part of this equation. Anytime you're hit with any kind of devastating news, cancer, anything else that we go through in the human race in terms of diseases, you're never prepared. And you do need people like Faith and Lisa to reach out and to say, you know what, we do have this. We do have these programs. We do have these resources. And it's a shame that we don't have a wider knowledge of what is available from our large organizations and the small grassroots nonprofits that are, in cities, that you will only know because you talked to somebody or somebody shared a resource with you. So we kind of are like a human chain of resources connecting one another to different things, whether it might be housing. I, in another area, am helping someone with housing, and she is very critical. Our housing was okay, but other people's aren't. And you have those that, it's not even a burden or a worry to them. But when you're going through something like this, I just think that the narrative has to grow and has to expand to include all areas of a person's life. And I think what COVID-19 taught me, or a lesson of that, is really be a partner, not only with your caregiver and my mom and people that you bring into your village and your community, but be a caregiver with the providers. Speak to them. Speak up. Don't be ashamed if you need something. Don't be ashamed if you don't understand, because the words are so long and it's going on forever. And the symptoms aren't changing, they're getting worse. You got to talk to them. You got to let them know, hey, I don't know what you're talking about when you spoke about those biomarkers. So they can just bring it down to your level so you can understand what you need to do for your loved one. Because that's what's going to help you in those days and in the time that you go to radiation and you go to chemo and you're back at home and something else is happening. So you need that kind of understanding, and you've got to grab it on the fly. And when you don't know, you reach out and you ask again. Like, this isn't for the faint at heart. If you don't like asking questions, it's going to push you to your limits. It's going to make you be comfortable with that process, because you've got to advocate for your loved one. You've got to speak up on their behalf. And I would always say to my mother's medical team, what is it that we don't know? I wish they would have told me in the beginning that we could do the cold cap process for my mother. Well, they didn't tell us that until after she started radiation, and then it was too late. And then when she got into chemo, it was even further late down the process. I said, from day one, I've been asking, what is it that I don't know that I need to know? Because I don't know the languaging the questions. But I think that communication piece is just so huge and so important for all of the paradigm, because we just need to work together to take care of our loved ones, and also to make the caregivers feel like their voice matters, and they're a very integral part of this process of healing.
And can I just quickly add
Sure.
something to what Wanda just said?
Sure.
I think that as caregivers, you need to know that it is your right to know. A provider cannot be speaking to you in a language that you don't understand and expect that then you will do what needs to be done for your loved one. Yes, they may be speaking English, but if they're talking about markers, for example, as you put it, it can be a little bit complicated and daunting for anybody that's sitting there and isn't understanding this. You must ask.
Yes.
You have to.
And you must make providers responsible for the information that they actually are providing to you. Like, you need to know, you have to understand what they're saying. It's non-negotiable.
Yes.
Exactly.
You're only able to provide good care if you understand the intricacies of what that means.
Right.
And in the absence of that, you will not provide your loved one with the best care.
Because
it's
you
the
could be
knowledge
dealing
that
with
comes from
someone,
empowerment.
Yeah, you could be dealing with someone who has a high school diploma, or who has no idea what, and even so with a college degree, sometimes depending, you could be a researcher and your field is in something else, and to hear someone talk about biomarkers, and we know that culturally too, people view doctors, as God sometimes, depending on the culture. And some people come in and they really don't want to, again, appear silly or uneducated.
Right.
And so they'll sit there and like, okay, but I think that it's important for doctors, if I'm in the room with a patient who just got diagnosed, or they're going, we're making referrals to various organizations, it's important to, I often say, like, I get down to the person's level and I say, did you understand what Dr. Such and such said? Like, they need to speak in layman's terms,
Yes.
Everybody can't deal with the big words. Even for myself, sometimes I'm like, what? Like, what, after the patient leaves, I'm like, what did that mean? So I think that also needs, we talk about the bigger picture, and it's even training, right? Training for professionals, training for physicians, to let them know that they need to speak to people, of course, professionally with the appropriate words, but also in layman's terms, and letting, to come to the patient's level, starting where the client is, and letting them know what their treatment regimen will be, and letting them know the options. I think in reference to your question, and thank you, Wanda, for sharing all of that. I think, Darci, COVID, I think we've kind of forgotten what it was like in March of 2020.
Yes.
So we can kind of snap out, and now we have a vaccine, and we could just have a cold, and that's COVID, and then we're over it. I think almost 1 million people died, and worldwide, and we've kind of forgotten what it was like for our patients, whether it was in dialysis or any type of chronic disease management. Our whole, and in cancer centers, the whole country was shut down, and people were relying on us. I don't know what it was like for you in your clinic, Faith, but they were relying, even though the world shut down, our clinic stayed open. I worked throughout the whole pandemic. I got, I contracted COVID twice. I was very, very ill, so much so that I had my will by my bedside, to say, okay, if I die, this is because I was as sick as a dog before vaccine. So I think that, I think it opened up my eyes. And at first I was a little bit, I have to be honest, really transparent. After returning from being out for 3 weeks with COVID, and finally being able to walk a mile, because I couldn't, and no taste and all of that. I was a little bit bitter. I was like, oh my gosh, all these social workers are working remotely. And it's after, while I was there in the clinic and seeing the patients who were really struggling with the isolation, the caregivers. You talk about American Cancer Society. They couldn't have any, no one wanted, it's like you had leprosy. No one wanted to drive in a car with you. No one wanted to say, I'll volunteer to take someone who may infect me that I may die. family members. But in the political climate that we were in at that time, George Floyd, all of those things, that was going on at that moment. But I think that after a few months and of being there in the clinic, I really saw the resilience, the love, the empathy, the positive self and family view that our patients had, Black and everyone in the clinic, that they
Wow.
really pushed to support their family members because they needed this chemotherapy to live, to prevent cancer cells from
Yes.
jumping from breast to
Yes.
brain,
Yes. Yes.
So all of those things. So it really opened up my eyes too. And in retrospect now, I was very grateful that I was able to recover from COVID, but also to serve patients and to serve their caregivers and to support them while they were going through all of that, because it was a tragic time. People in clinic, they're dying. It was family members, caregivers who were dropping their mothers off to get treatment when 3 or 4 cousins died. And you couldn't funeralize your family, your loved one. So it was, we really need to think back to those times and be grateful, but we also need to make sure that we are supporting the physical, the mental health, the spiritual health of our caregivers. And again, just pushing to make sure that that there's support out there. And I know that it's difficult. You mentioned, Wanda, not being able to, if there's no social worker, there's no programs. It hurts to hear that there's not that much resources out there, but it's a reality. But try to reach out, to try to find national organizations that help everyone instead of, do a Google search, look and find out.
I've reached out to quite a few national organizations. The problem is, it shouldn't be the caregiver doing more work. When you're 24/7, or even if you're, in the mild stage of caregiving, which I was, at certain times with mama, you don't have the time to do all of that kind of legwork. You know what I mean? It should be right there, like you guys have it in your medical setting. It should be right here in Los Angeles, California. It should be in Florida. It should be in Texas. It should be in Dallas. It should be in Portland. It should be in San Francisco. We as human beings, as patients, because we're all patients, even if we're providers, we're a patient at some point. We shouldn't have to do so much extra legwork for something that could be easily integrated into our healthcare system across the board. It's not for lack of the caregiver. Yeah, it's not for lack of the caregiver not reaching out, because, trust me, I've reached out. But, and with cancer, it's called Cancer Cares as well. They have a call-in program. For mental health assistance that I did that also. But it's not for lack of that. It's that we need it to be brought into the cities, into the spaces that we live in, that we're a part of, that I go directly to my doctor, what's there. And I'm talking about the number 1 and 2 hospitals in the top 10. I'm not talking about off-brand, off-name hospitals or in medical deserts, but that's the problem. There has to be an equity for it.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, the last thing I'm going to say is, whether I'm trying to be cognizant of the time too, but I think you mentioned something before too about, caregivers and the team. And whether we or whether you know it, you are a part of the team. We have, and whether we're in nursing homes or we say, we're having a care team. We're going to have your care team. You, the caregiver, is a part of the care team. There's a lot of work to do professionally, institutional wise, everywhere. And I think as I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking of what can we do to make sure that all of these, it will take time, of course, make that all of these things that we are able to have the standard of care. Sometimes I'm hard on the place where I work. I'm like, there's not enough, and then when I hear other people talk, I'm like, oh, well, how could you not have a social worker at your clinic, you know? So
Yeah, but they don't.
there's a lot of work to be done.
This
And
has
you are
been the most enlightening experience I have ever had. I wish that this could go on
Bravo.
another 30, 45 minutes or so, but we have gone over our time. You ladies are absolutely amazing. Ms. Wanda, I take my hat off to you.
Yeah.
You are a picture of strength, endurance, and I am praying for you that God opens some doors in California to get you the mental health, the financial health, the physical health that you need to continue to assist you and grow you to be able to be the phenomenal caregiver that you are. I apologize, guys, for going over, but this was so good. And I'm just so honored to have been a part of this. You ladies are phenomenal. Thank you so much.